Welcome back to Families in Action, brought to you on your hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS. If you're just joining us, May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and we are in studio with Mike Doherty from Henry Mayo Newhall Hospital and Larry Schallert from the College of the Canyons. Cary, before we went on the break, Mike was telling us about I thought it was called the Freedom Bell or something like that, but it's the mental health bell, right?
Right.
The Freedom Bell, right? And
that's in Philadelphia.
And it's just, it really is a symbol of the change in the way that we look at mental health issues and currently known as disorders, right? And Larry, you had mentioned something, the word stigma.
Right. There's, we find that there's a huge stigma attached to having a mental health problem, even if it's, as simple as a depression or an anxiety. We know there's stigma to getting care, even if you've been traumatized. So what we're trying to get across is the people that have a mental health problem or that feel like there's a stigma attached. We feel like you're showing courage to actually ask for help, and what we know is that people that get help do recover, and some recover more than others, but there is always a positive outcome when we get people into personal counseling. So one of the things we're trying to do is train the community to know the warning signs of suicide, know what some of the risk factors are, and so we can get people into care. For instance, last year there was 1,100 completed suicides from students that are on college campuses. 1,100 is pretty high. 2 years ago, there was 3 of those students were College of the Canyon students,
right.
Which percentage-wise is pretty high compared to the rest of the
number of college campuses that there are, right?
Right.
But y'all think about it, not to cut in, I want you to finish what you're saying, but that's 1,100 kids.
1,100 kids. Those are kids that are basically age 16 to 25, although we know there's lots of students that are over 25 that go to the college. The point is we know that there's a reason. Those 3 students, for instance, that took their lives, none of them had come into the personal counseling program.
Right.
So we know that that's probably because they didn't know about it. There was a stigma attached to going, or there was a stigma attached to having a mental health disorder. So what we're trying to do is break down that stigma and train faculty, staff, community members, everyone to know the warning signs, to know how to assess, with something like mental health first aid, and encourage those students to get into counseling if that's what's needed, and include community members.
Larry, did the event already pass Shine a Light?
Yes.
It already passed, right?
That
is something to raise awareness for those 1,100, right?
That's right. We had 1,100 Chinese lanterns to represent the 1,100 students that take their life every year, and it was like a beautiful display out in our honor grove, and we had representatives from all of our local mental health agencies, including Michael was there, Henry Mayo, Child and Family Center. We had the Santa Clarita Mental Health Center and some others out there just to sort of talk, and we've talked to lots of students that came up and just talk to us about how suicide's affected them, somebody in their life, somebody in their family, one of their friends either knows, maybe even we've talked to a lot of students that have actually attempted it themselves. And so we got them into counseling and talked some more about it. Since we've been doing this outreach for the last year and a half, we have not had any students from College of the Canyons that have taken their life. So we know this kind of works. So we're trying to get out into the community now and do this in the community through the Blue Ribbon Task Force. And so maybe we can talk about that at a certain point.
We can. Here's my belief, too, and I've been working with people for 30-something years. You can jump in and help me with this. Most people that are suicidal reach out for some kind of help.
Right.
And it's unheard. The other part is, and I really believe that most people that end up killing or attempting to hurt themselves really don't want to die. They just don't want to feel the pain the emotional pain that they're feeling, and it overwhelms them. What are you thinking about what I just said?
I think you're absolutely right. I mean, when there's probably 95% or something in that area, there's some ambivalence. They give off some kind of message. They tell somebody. They give some kind of warning sign to somebody, whether it's through Facebook or they drop something with their parent, or they drop something with their friend or colleague. They let people know. They give off a warning sign, and that shows that people are not necessarily fully committed to taking their life, but they have some ambivalence. And but as you said, Cary, I think you said it really well. There's such pain. It's hard to describe
Right.
the level of pain that comes with feeling totally hopeless and feeling like there's really no way out. You feel so trapped. You just really don't think there's an option. When you know, from the outside there is. It feels like there's a storm over you, and you're not going to be out of the storm. But we know often that storm will pass if you can get some help.
And the problem is we know that, but the pain gets so bad.
Pain can be really brutal.
Right, and I guess the message what I want to give is, you know what, you can make it through anything. Suicide really is a permanent solution to a temporary problem. It really is. You can walk through anything that happens in life if you want to, number one, and if you reach out when you need to.
Right, and we know people do all kinds of different things, like, you know, you get involved in alcohol and drugs, and they withdraw, and they give away their stuff, and there's all kinds of things that they do to try to make themselves feel better. But we know getting help, professional help, is often the best solution. So, Michael, you had some statistics about what's going on. Are we at it?
Go for it,
Okay.
Mike.
Yeah, let's just look at a couple of things here. Number one, we're talking about depression as well. Clinical depression affects more than 19 million Americans
The
every year.
difference between clinical depression and regular depression.
You know, there's all kinds of different sorts of depression. There's a bipolar disorder, and there's major depression, and there's dysthymia. My sense, you know, depression is just feeling like, you know, it's hopeless, and you're feeling bad about yourself, and you're feeling bad about the future. And I'm not clinical depression. I'm not sure how you define that.
I think the way I would define it is everybody gets depressed. They have a fight with their boss, their girlfriend or boyfriend or husband or wife leaves. They just had a bad date. They were in a major deal, but they get over it. Major depression is when you can't get over it. When
Can't
you
get over it.
can't.
That's fair to say.
Yeah,
Right.
when it's like long term, when it lasts more than days, and it starts affecting you in every area of your life. You can't go to work, you can't go to school, you don't want to get out of bed. I would call that clinical
Yeah, I
depression.
think
And
that's
time to get some help.
That's a really nice way to frame it.
19 million.
And of that 19 million, fewer than half seek treatment because they believe it's not serious, they can treat it themselves, and they believe depression is a personal weakness.
Right.
Say that again.
Of the 19 million people that are affected by clinical depression, fewer than half seek treatment, and the main reasons are because they believe it's not serious, that depression's not serious, they believe they can treat it themselves, and they believe that depression is a personal weakness.
On that note, Bob,
This is Families in Action, brought to you on your hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS.
welcome back to Families in Action on our hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS. I'm Cary Quashen, along with my co-host Bob, and we have Mike and Larry with us today. And we're just talking about clinical depression and 19 million people that suffer. And listen to this one. Over 90% of people who die from suicide have clinical depression.
Right.
And if you remember, 19 million people have mental illness stuff, and only half gets help. So it is one of the most preventable diseases around, is where I'm going.
Now, suicide is the 8th leading cause of death in the U.S. Now, listen to this. 30,000 Americans die by suicide each year, but 500,000 Americans attempt suicide each year, with substance abuse being involved in 50% of all suicide attempts.
Right.
You know, suicide is one of those things that's we're only now beginning to really understand. It's often a part of all kinds of problems, whether it's substance abuse or depression. We know people with mental illness, people with schizophrenia, for instance, often take their life. We know people with autism often are bullied. One of the things we're becoming more aware of, the people on the autism spectrum are bullied by their peers while they're growing up. They're bullied on Facebook and on Twitter, and they often will attempt suicide because they just don't feel they have other options. So across the board, there's different kinds of populations. For instance, the LGBTQ community, people that are lesbian, gay, trans, bisexual, they're often bullied, and if they're you get a lot of support from either their family or their friends or their colleagues or their college. They often feel so isolated and so depressed that they feel like taking their life is an option.
Especially youngsters when they start growing up and they really don't know where they fit in this world,
Right.
And they start feeling different and out of the normal box.
That's why so many in that age group, between 16 and 25,
Right.
attempt suicide more than anybody else. They're not the highest rate of
But
completed.
let's look at it. They're not the highest rate of completion. Let's look at the reason, like we were saying earlier. A lot of times people don't really want to die.
Right.
They just don't want to feel the pain, so they're screaming out for help.
Right. We know that we've actually talked to people that have, for instance, jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge and survived, and we know that those folks, most of them will tell you halfway down they changed their mind. And to us that means there's some ambivalence there. They're not totally so. We want to have the whole community be there to listen and to pick up the warning signs, to know what kind of the stressors are, so that when a student or a child or whoever comes up and starts talking about suicide or starts talking about feeling hopeless, that there's somebody there to listen non-judgmentally, instead of say, oh, it's not a problem, oh, just buck up, just kind of, you'll be okay tomorrow, that kind of thing.
Get over it.
So we want to
Get
teach.
over it.
We want to
Right.
teach the right way to
Right.
support someone.
Yeah, or you're just having a bad hair day. No, we want people to know that, hey, when somebody starts talking about killing themselves, you got to stop and
You better
ask some questions.
You
and
better
start
take it
listening
serious.
non-judgmentally.
You better take it serious. I remember I got a phone call one.
That's
one
right.
night.
When you said that about halfway down off the Golden Gate Bridge, me and Cary looked at
I had a phone call one night, and
Yeah.
it was like 11 o'clock, and I checked my messages, and there was a girl, Tammy. I don't have to say her last name, and just the way she said, "Hey, call me, Cary." And I laid in bed. It was late, and I said, "I don't want to call her." Then I started thinking. I said, "Wait a minute, something's wrong here." And I had called up and talked to her mother. I said, "Go check on her." She was about dead.
Wow.
So they got her to the hospital and
Right.
did their thing, and thank God she's alive today. Has wonderful kids and a family.
It's great.
And it was just one of those things that just rang in my bell. So just like Larry said, there's little warning signs, and you better be listening.
Right. Right.
Yeah, I have to say, I'm not a clinical person, but I do well calls for
Right.
the behavioral health unit. And I called on a lady who had been gone from our unit a couple of days, and I was calling to see how she was doing, and I could tell by her voice that she was in a very bad way. And I started talking to her a little bit, and she said, Mike, I got to tell you something. I'm really feeling suicidal, and I don't know how I'm going to get out of this one. And I immediately said, do you have any way of getting to an emergency room? Do you have any friends you can call, anything? And she said, no, absolutely not. So I said, I'm going to make a call on your behalf. Is that okay? And she said, yes. So I made a call to the Ventura.
And you saved her life.
Well, she wound up in our unit the next
Right.
day, and I went up to her. Somebody pointed her out to me, and I said, I'm Mike. And she turned around with tears in her eyes and said, you saved my life.
You got to remember too, and you did, that's one of those feel-good stories because it just gave me chills. But you got to remember, a lot of times when people are that depressed, clinically depressed, they don't reach out. They stay home.
She
they don't
wouldn't
get
have.
out of bed. They have no friends.
She wouldn't have.
They've isolated themselves from the world.
Right. Often.
So you know what I want to do? Let's go over some of the warning signs and stuff like that. 'cause I want to make sure.
Can I
we get them
interject
all
real
out.
quick?
Yeah.
I don't want to wait to the end of the show to do this because
Yeah.
people need help. Let me give them a
Please.
phone number
Please.
right
Please.
now.
We can
This
do
is
this
a
a couple of
suicide
times.
hotline,
Please.
and we promoted this at the Shine
Yeah,
a
go
Light.
for it.
1-800-273-TALK, TALK. Or here's the phone number side of that: 1-800-273-8255. Listen, if you think you need to, this is going to be the most important phone number you will ever call in your life. Do it.
And up here in Santa Clarita, remember, we have Henry Mayo Hospital. It's open 24 hours a day, 365 days a year.
We never close.
And we never close. And anybody can walk in that ER at any time if they're feeling hopeless and helpless and be helped immediately.
And we want everybody to put that number in their cell phone. We have a campaign. Everybody that's on our campus at College of the Canyons, whether they're staff, student, secretary, assistant, you name it, faculty, administrator, we're having everybody put that number in their cell phone. So 24/7, whether they're on campus or they're at home with a friend, a family member, that number is in their cell phone, and they can call and talk to somebody that's an expert, whether they're talking about themselves or they're talking about a friend, that will talk to them, that will refer them to local resources such as Henry Mayo, and be there for them to walk them through.
Larry, read the number again.
The number is 1-800-273-8255. 1-800-273-TALK. That's 8255.
Gotcha.
So we want everybody to put that in their cell phone. You do it right now, you won't forget.
Hey, Larry, I just put that in my cell phone right
Hey,
now.
there you go.
We'll be right back after this break. This is Families in Action, brought to you on your hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS.